G'day folks, you're here for another session at the Prompt Engineering Summit. We're going to be talking about building complex data visualizations with ChatGPT. So on to the presentation. As I said, my name's Greg Nash. I'm a principal consultant at Dear Watson Consulting. I'm a certified Azure Solution Architect. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the data platform. And I work for Dear Watson Consulting, who's a Microsoft solution partner in the data and AI space. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I run the local Power BI Melbourne meetup here in Melbourne, Australia. If you're interested in Power BI, worth checking out. So as we sort of embark on this discussion around the kind of intricate process of building complex visualizations using Vega-Lite and ChatGPT, I wanted to kickstart our thought process with some insightful words. So first we start off with Thomas Edison, who was obviously an inventor, who reminds us that what may initially appear as failure is in reality a stepping stone towards discovery. And each attempt or each iteration brings us closer to what doesn't work and guides us towards what does. In the spirit of perseverance, Winston Churchill beautifully encapsulates the challenges associated with technology, and especially sort of large language models, I think, where the journey towards success is continual. It's not a destination, but an ongoing journey of refinement and learning. When we encounter hurdles, they're not endpoints, but they nudge us in the right direction. And then in the third quote for today, I've got John C. Maxwell, who urges us to embrace failure as component of progress. The concept of failing forward is central to iterative development. And I can tell you that I certainly live my life in this way. I am happy to try and fail as many things as possible. I think that's how you need to be in this space in technology. And if you're working in the AI space or the generative AI space or large language models, or you're just trying to learn a little bit more about prompt engineering, be prepared to embrace failure. I think that's particularly important. You need to have a positive mindset. Now, in the landscape that I work in data science and AI, where the ability to visually represent complex data sets is basically what we do. And we're doing things that are potentially outside the realms of what the standard data visualization tools will allow us to do, or at least we're trying to do potentially some more complex stuff. In today's discussion, I'm hoping to equip you, an aspiring prompt engineer, with some knowledge and some strategies to navigate maybe some more intricate processes as we delve into the principles of using iterative development in large language models and explore how building robust and complex solutions using ChatGPT and maybe illuminate the pathway to becoming a more proficient prompt engineer. To start out with, though, I need to give you a bit of a conceptual foundation. So let's crack on and we'll see how we go in terms of getting some of these things across to you. So, of course, the tools we're going to be using today, the first one, ChatGPT. I presume you're relatively familiar with this. If you're in this space, you're looking to improve either your ChatGPT skills or your generative AI prompt engineering skills in general. Obviously, it's a large language model. It's very good at natural language processing and all those good things. The second tool that we'll be using is a language is called Vega-Lite. Vega-Lite is a high-level grammar for visually interactive graphics. That means it's a language that we use to describe different graphics. And it's used across all sorts of different tools in all sorts of different areas. You'll see a lot of the web visualizations, data visualizations that you've come across in the past. They will have been built in Vega or Vega-Lite. In this case, we'll be using a Microsoft tool. That Microsoft tool is called Power BI. It is the ubiquitous Microsoft data visualization tool. You can think of it as Excel with some steroids attached. It's really like a really high-level data visualization tool from Power BI. And inside the Power BI tool, we'll be using a special visualization called generative, which allows us to use Vega-Lite grammar to describe our data visualizations. So Deneb is our visualization framework that allows us to define our Vega-Lite specification. So on the left-hand side here, you can see you've got some Vega-Lite specs. That is basically just JSON. We describe what we want to show on the screen in JSON in this specification. On the right-hand side, the visualization gets rendered into Power BI. And then on the bottom there, you can see there's a little table of the data that we've got in our data set that's supplied to the visualization. So we've got this language that allows us to describe visualizations, and lucky for us, we've also got a tool called ChatGPT that is extremely good at language. Fortunately for me, ChatGPT already knows about Vega-Lite, and it already knows about Vega because they've been around for long enough for ChatGPT to understand it. And really, when it comes to prompting and how we were going to approach this, there's obviously a lot of different ways that you can prompt, these text-based language models, right? You can do sort of text completion style prompts. So you can say the quick brown fox, and it'll tell you that jumped over the lazy dog, that kind of thing. You can give it instruction-based prompts, so like these single prompts or multiple choice prompts, or you see end shot or few shot prompting, right? Where you've got a few examples of what you want in terms of a desired output. You've got chain of thought prompting and generated knowledge prompting, and you've got these different prompting techniques that you can potentially use to prompt your language model. The interesting thing, and based on the experimentation that I've done so far, and I've been trying to break it as much as possible, I guess, is that when you're faced with something that's more complex than just something relatively straightforward, you need to have a prompting strategy that allows you to do that. So what do you do if it's too complex for a single prompt? And the example I've got here is a data visualization that we are trying to build, right? So this is a data visualization. It's from a book, one of my favorite books on data visualization. It's been lifted from the New York Times, I believe, to show New York City's weather in 2003. And you can see it's a fairly complex kind of bar chart type thing. You've got each bar represents the temperature, the min and the max temperature on any given day. So you've got your actual high and your actual low is represented by that sort of dark purpley color. Then the lighter kind of gray bars in the background, they are your all-time min and all-time maximum temperatures. And then there's a darker bar that runs through the middle, and that's your normal range. So that's a 1 standard deviation up or above, or your average temperatures throughout that for that time of year, if you like. Then down the bottom, you've also got this cumulative rainfall. So you've got two charts here sort of stacked on top of each other. You can see there's some different numbers and things like that. It's broken up by months. It goes from -20 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's great visualization. This is the type of data visualization we'd want to build in the world of data visualization. It's really, really strong in terms of its data density. It tells a really great story because you can see the macro story of how the temperature rises and falls throughout the year, and then you can see the micro story of each day and whether the day was somewhere near the all-time high or was it low or lower than average for that day. And so there's a lot of different sort of pieces of information you can glean from a single visualization. That makes it a really strong data visualization. When you're faced with this type of visualization, though, like I couldn't write a single ChatGPT prompt or prompt in anything really that would allow me to build this in a single go, right? It's too complicated. I'd have to really think about it and get right. And even when when we've completed this process and we asked ChatGPT to generate a prompt, it generated most of it, but it didn't quite get there, right? So what do you do when you're faced with a situation where you're trying to build something that's too complex for a single prompt? And I think most things fall into this category, in my opinion. There's not too many things, and I think a lot of prompt engineering is focused on how do we craft the perfect prompt. and we have to craft a perfect system prompt. We have to craft this one perfect prompt that's going to get this perfect output each time. I think that's the wrong way to think about prompting. I think the right way to think about prompting is to say that, well, you can use multiple prompts to get to your outcome, right? And that's, I think, most people, it's common sense. You kind of use multiple prompts to get to the place where you want to be. So I was faced with this, and a friend of mine said, "I'll bet you a beer you can't get ChatGPT to build this." And I took that as a challenge. So this is what I know. A lot of bad prompts is better than one perfect prompt. And I think we need to embrace a concept of iterative development to be able to achieve this. Now let's talk a little bit about iterative development, because this is not a new concept. There's a really great quote from John Gall from a book called The Systems Bible. It's a story. It's not a story. It's a book about systems, and really it talks about how systems are constantly trying to fail on you. Right? There's all these things trying to make things fail, and one of the things that John Gall found was that a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. So this is at the heart of our kind of iterative development idea, right? Is that we need to build something very simple that works. If we want to build something complicated, start with something simple. The inverse proposition is also true. That means if you try to design something complex from scratch, if you try to write a perfect prompt from scratch, it won't work, and you can't make it work because there's too much complexity in your end result, right? And so I think you need to move away from this idea of trying to craft these singular perfect prompts and move towards this kind of agile development process. Iterative development's been around for a long time. You've heard me just say the word agile. Agile is an iterative development process for software development, right? We talk about iterative development in almost everything. There's this funny old kind of relationship between agility or agile or iterative development and originality, right? That I think about this a lot, where if you're trying to build something extremely original, you need to be more iterative, right? And typically a lot of the stuff that we're building using these large language models and using prompt engineering is a completely new and original thing. It's not necessarily something that's been defined before, because we're not really going to be using a large language model for that. So let me kind of ram home this idea to you, right? So if you're building a house, it's a pretty unoriginal thing to build. Thousands and thousands of millions and millions probably of houses get built every year, right? And so the way to build a house is relatively well defined. It's not a particularly original thing to do. That means you can use a pretty kind of unagile way of developing. We call this waterfall type development, where you just say, okay, I'm going to do step A and step B and step C and step D, and then we're going to have a house at the end of it. You wouldn't use a really agile way of building a house. An agile way to build a house would be, say, let's build a wall over here. I don't really like the wall there. Let's take the wall down and we'll put it up over here. Now I like the wall here. Let's build the second wall, and let's build the third wall. It doesn't really make sense to build a house that way, right? And so for these low originality, well-defined kind of activities, you don't necessarily need an iterative kind of approach. If you're a comedian and you are trying to build a comedy set, and for those of you who are familiar with the likes of, say, Bill Burr and these other comedians, they go on these long tours of various venues to work on their comedy set, right? And they do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of iterations of the set before they take it to do their Netflix special or whatever it is. So you've got these comedians, they take a very agile approach to things, because they need to basically come up with something completely original. It's incredibly difficult because it's really hard to make people laugh at any given time. And so you need to go through these hundreds of iterations in order to get to a point where you've got an hour's worth of comedy that's available to you to use for your set, right? So So they're all almost on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to this kind of originality and agility kind of curve. Now, if you if you have an unoriginal thing, so you say you want to try and build a house, and then you try and build it in an agile way, like I said before, you build a wall and then move the wall and then move the wall again, you're kind of wasting money, right? So that's kind of in the waste of money zone if you're not original enough. Conversely, if you're highly original, having a highly original thing that you're trying to build, and you're not agile enough, or you don't use an iterative development process, you end up in this never finish zone, because the thing changes more quickly than the project can kind of catch up. And you see this happen with people when they try to do software development using waterfall methodology, and changes are constantly happening, and you just never get to the finish line. And so you end up in this never finish zone. So there's a bit of a fine balance between this originality and agility kind of concept. So what we can learn from this is, if we have a very clear goal, we're going to have fewer iterations, right? Or we're going to require fewer iterations. So I'm kind of lucky in this space that this data visualization is already well defined for me, right? I don't need to think about how the thing's going to look. I can just copy what I'm doing here already. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing these types of things. The clearer you have in terms of design or a goal, the easier it's going to be, and the less iterations you're potentially going to have to go through, because you're going to have a much easier idea. Now, one of the things, particularly when you're interacting with something like ChatGPT or a large language model, is it's going to go off on tangents by itself, right? You have to be very clear about what you want for the next small piece of outcome to happen. I think this is why this is the best way to work with these models, is because if you try to give it a very large piece of work, it's going to potentially go off in a few different directions. And if you try and do that over and over again, there's too many possibilities for it to kind of drift away. And I've even just working on with the tool today, I was trying to get it to build some data visualizations, and I was just giving it too much to do in one go, and it was trying one way, and then it's trying a different way, and it's trying a different way, and I had to calm down, pare it back to a simple single prompt that would work. And we'll talk a little bit about that more, and I'll give you an example. So once we have our clear goal, then we want to make sure that all of the aspects of that goal are ready to go. We can call this kind of drafting kind of phase, right? So this is a standard visualization in Power BI. You can see it doesn't look anywhere near like what I want it to look like, but at least it works. The thing about this data visualization is that it's a simple line chart, and I can see that my lines are in the right spot using this. You can see that I'm in Australia, so it sweeps down instead of sweeping upwards like it does in America. So we sweep down through the middle of the year, it gets colder through the middle of the year, and then hotter at the ends of the year. You can see that my high and my low, which are the light pink and the light blue lines, are above my dark red and dark blue lines, which are my min and max for that individual day. So the data generally looks correct, which is what we want to ensure that we do before we embark on trying to build something using a large language model. We want to make sure that all of the inputs to this are going to look good and are correct. The last thing you want to do is confuse two things, particularly in the world of data visualization, where there's a lot of things that can go wrong with the data. You can have data quality issues, you can have missing values, you can have all sorts of strange things can happen with the data. And so we want to make sure that our data is correct. This translates to pretty much everything that you're doing, anything that you're doing. If you're writing a movie script or whatever, you want to have a clear idea of kind of what you're doing going in, and making sure all those inputs are there ready to go, rather than trying to invent too much on the fly. The less you can do, the better anyway, because you're going to go down less rabbit holes. And so, like I said, we want to start simple, and we want to make sure that we can build this thing iteratively. And when I say start simple, so in the world of data visualization, if we look at this visualization, the top version of the top part of the visualization is essentially a bar chart. It's not the same as it's actually what we call a column chart in the Power BI world, where a bar chart runs horizontally and a column chart runs vertically. So a column chart, each one of those kind of days is actually a column that goes from high to low, and you can actually see the legend here in the middle of the chart showing you that. So each bar is a column, or each column is an individual column. So we want to create basically a column chart. Now it's got a min and a max, and it's got these different layers. We need to work that out. But so the way that we started was just to build a basic column chart. So that's what we did. So here I just created a very basic column chart. On the left-hand side, I've just got my Vega-Lite code. On the right-hand side, you can see a basic column chart, and I use the maximum temperature as my basic column. And it's kind of sweeping down how I would expect it to do. And if you could see the whole column, the whole chart there, you could see it sweeps back up again at the end of the year. So I've got this piece of code that basically works, right? It's a start, it starts and it works. There's no errors, there's no issues. I'm ready to begin kind of iterating now on my code. So I start with a very simple working system. And then it's really just a matter of doing simple iterative prompts. Now, I'm pretty irreverent with ChatGPT when I talk to it. I said, nice one, you're the best. Here's some Vega-Lite code. Now, what I said there was, to begin this, was I said, do you know Vega-Lite? Are you familiar with the I didn't know whether ChatGPT would know it or not. And it said, yeah, I know Vega-Lite, and here is the thing, and I'm familiar with the syntax, and I can help you. And I was like, nice one, you're the best. Here's some Vega-Lite code. I need it to be a column chart, not a bar chart. Can you change it? So that was the first thing. It started off as a bar chart that ran horizontally, and it turned it into a column chart. My output was what I got down the bottom. And you can see I got a basic column chart. And that's perfect, a simple system, and it completely worked. So then we needed to move to the next step. So my next step, I was like, well, I've got a column chart now that moves, that has all my max values. I want to get my min values now. So I want it to be the min being the lower bounds of the column and the max being the higher bounds. And I said something to that effect. I said, awesome, that works, except we need to change the date to a temporal type on the x-axis. There was a problem with the date. And we need to make the column have a min and max value. The min temperature measure will set the lower bounds of the column, and the max temp will set the upper bounds. Can you do this, right? So I gave it another very simple kind of instruction. And I use the output from the previous prompt, so I copy and paste the code into the prompt potentially each time if I feel like it's going to forget. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of is that, you know, ChatGPT only has a certain amount of memory. It's going to lose context after a certain number of prompts, particularly if it's generating a reasonable amount of code. There's only so far back it can go. So you may need to reset the model every now and then. And often what I will do is, if I feel like I've gone in the wrong direction, I will copy and paste that code out of the chat completely. I'll start a whole new chat, give it a whole new set of context. Okay, we're up to here, and this is what we're doing, and here's the current code, and then start again. The reason why I do that is I do feel like it will go down. If it goes down a path, it will that wrong turn will be included in the history, and it will always kind of remember that. Now you can kind of say to it, hey, forget the last thing you did. Do you want to, you know, or maybe can you take the thing from two prompts ago? You don't really want to get into that space. So if that does happen, you feel like it's taken a turn in a direction that you're not happy with, or it's not going to work, you'll need to potentially completely restart and reset things. And if you're in the business of building solutions in the prompting world, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about, you know, what I think the implications of that are, then you'll need to consider that too. Is that how do you completely wipe the slate clean and then start again? All right, so we got the output that we were expecting. We got a min and a max value in a column chart. So this is fantastic. So we're using the output from the previous prompt to feed this prompt. So then yet another one. That works great. Thanks, you rule. We're going to add a layer that is the average as a line over the top of the column chart. The measure is called the all-time average. So I had a measure for all-time average. Basically, the way that Deneb works is it has this data set of values, and you feed it in the values that you want. And so it put this red line over the top. It chose the color red. I didn't choose the color, but I didn't end up using this all-time average value, but I did want to see if I could generate a line that showed the all-time average value. And then we did some extra bits and pieces to fix that up. So that worked well as well. Like I said, I've got a little note here. ChatGPT will sometimes forget some context after a few prompts, so it's a good idea to either remind it or restart your chat periodically. And keeping that kind of idea, and obviously, you know, as new versions of these large language models come out, different models will have different capabilities and capacities. This will become less and less of a problem, hopefully. I still think, though, that going down the rabbit hole thing is going to be a problem for a while, because I can't see you being able to, maybe you'll be able to delete prompts out of history to remove it from the context. Maybe something like that will help with that. But essentially, you can see we're iterating, getting slightly more towards where we wanted to go. So then the next prompt I said was, "Nice work, you're really great." I'm always polite. we like to add another column that represents the all-time high and the all-time low. This is in a lighter color, and it sits underneath the main column measure for all-time. For the all-time high, the measure for the all-time high is all-time max, and the measure for the all-time low is all-time min. Now, that was probably, I would say that's about the limit of things you want to give it in a single prompt. So this is what I'm talking about. A large number of small, simple prompts is going to be more effective than trying to write it all in a single, super complex, solve everything at once prompt. There's maybe 3 instructions there. I'm adding another column, this light gray column that's appeared in the bottom area that shows all-time high and low. I told it it's going to be a lighter color. I told it it's going to sit back. So that means it's going to sit underneath the other one. So there's a layering kind of aspect to this data visualization stuff. So it has to be on a different layer. And here's the 2 measure names. And I feel like that's probably the maximum number of things you kind of want to give it at any given time, if you don't want it to potentially kind of rearrange things. Another thing that can happen is that it can, it'll summarize code, and it'll do things in a way that to make, you know, to save tokens and to make life easy for itself. If you give it a large chunk of code, one of the benefits of this Vega-Lite code, it's a relatively small snippet of code each time. There's only maybe sort of less than 40 or 50 lines in each snippet, so ChatGPT can comfortably hold that in the time that it has. Now, if you have a situation where you've got a very large snippet of code, then you'll need to potentially only give it snippets of that code. So that means you are responsible for understanding the way those 2 pieces interact with each other and all that kind of stuff as well. So obviously this is another capacity issue that potentially will get better with time, but you do need to be careful about how much you're giving it at any given time. So small snippets and do small iterations is going to give you the best results from what I've discovered so far, anyway, in terms of my working with this tool. And then you just keep doing that over and over again. I'm not going to bore you with every single prompt. There's actually a video, and I'll give you the link at the end of the presentation, to me on YouTube building this data visualization from end to end. There's 3 1-hour sessions that we do it in. And you can see every single prompt that I do to make it. But in the end, when humans and AI work together, anything is possible. So we'll skip ahead, and we ended up with a data visualization that looks like this, right? So we solved a whole bunch of issues on the way through to get to this point. And like I said, there's no way I could have written a single prompt to give you this data visualization. And we tried. We told ChatGPT, "Hey, can you give me a prompt that that would write this?" And it spat something out, but it's never going. It didn't give it the. And then we copied that prompt and pasted it back into ChatGPT, but we didn't get the same outcome. And that is just because there's just too much going on here. You can see we've got I've added this interactivity, so you can see what it looks like when it's animated. But when you select different years, we've got 3 charts now actually on the final visualization. We've got these white lines running through the chart. We've got these horizontal dark gray lines showing us the months. We've got these total rainfall chart in the middle here, where rain comes down from the roof of the chart with little raindrops on the end of the bars. There's a cumulative rainfall graph that looks like the original. So you can see that a whole lot of stuff. Now, this only took, if you had have asked me at the beginning of this, I didn't know if it was possible or not when I first started this. And if you had have asked me at the beginning whether how long it would take for someone to build this kind of as a custom visual, you'd expect a quote for a week, maybe 2 weeks to build something like this. So for ChatGPT to be able to generate the code required for this in only 3 hours is unbelievably good. So that's a really great outcome. Since experimenting with this in the meantime, I've had a couple of failures where I've tried to build something that hasn't quite worked, and I've had some really good successes again as well. So it's not going to be absolutely perfect every time, and you're gonna run into, similarly, even when you're just building prompt engineering just for regular work, some prompts are really good and they work really easily. Some prompts are going to be a little bit more difficult. I think that's true here as well. That also comes down to how much knowledge you have around the tool. Now, I didn't know anything about Vega-Lite, and I didn't know anything about Deneb or the way that that JSON specification. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to data visualization. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know the syntax of the language, which made it a really good, although to be fair, I am familiar with a lot of programming language. So I know a lot of kind of programming kind of fundamentals. So I think that put me in a good place to be somebody to experiment in this way with this particular language. I think there's a certain amount of base knowledge you need to be able to achieve this type of stuff, but you don't need to go in with having really strong syntactical knowledge of the specific language that you're talking about. You just need to know the fundamentals, I think, around these types of things. Some quick tips and tricks about what I discovered while I'm using ChatGPT. The model's built on human conversation, and if you're polite, you get better outcomes. There was actually something released from Microsoft just recently where they said this is true, right? So that if you've got a good vibe, it's all about the vibes with the model. And look, I think it's more fun if you do it this way as well. And you saw the way that I kind of speak to the model with my prompts. I'm pretty irreverent. You don't have to spell anything right. I love that. You just write it in and it'll figure out what you mean most of the time. And if it doesn't, it'll probably ask. So I think being polite, being friendly, and make it fun. That's the best way to interact with these large language models. It's trained on human interaction. Why not make it a fun interaction? Starting simple, like we have, that's kind of the point of this. Start with a basic working output and iterate and build complexity into that as you go. You will go down the wrong path, and if you watch the full video, you'll be able to see me go in the wrong direction a few times. But we bring it back, we bring it back, and then we start again, and we get there in the end. And it doesn't take very long to reset, right? The great thing about this whole idea, and one of the tips here, is document your iterations, right? The fact that you've got this prompt history means that you've got all of the history of the code that you had in the past. So you can always go back and pick up the code as you went. Or if you're using good kind of code-based version control systems like Git, then that's obviously relatively straightforward as well. Keep your mind focused on the end goal. Always important. Maintain clarity and effectiveness. It is important because there's that rabbit hole effect that tends to happen when you're dealing with things, particularly when you're doing things iteratively. You will find yourself straying off into strange places, and you need to stay focused on the main goal. What are you actually trying to achieve? Try and iterate towards that rather than trying to iterate towards everything. And then utilize feedback. So, in this case, it was mostly just me. I actually did this in front of with the community. So as part of the kind of Power BI community, we have a session every Friday, and the community were there, and they were providing feedback as well about how they thought things should go. Utilize, if you're building anything, you should always utilize end user feedback and analytics as much as possible. So do what you can to get it in front of people and ask them how you think you should change it. It's much easier to change things iteratively like that with simple user feedback. And if you're going for user feedback, one tip I'll give you is that you should be specific about the type of feedback that you need, right? So ensure that you say, well, what do you think of the color of this? Not what do you think of this chart or visualization, or what do you think of this game, or what do you think of this software I'm building? Be specific about the type of feedback you need. It will make a huge difference. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this session on building complex data visualizations using ChatGPT. If you've got any questions, then do feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm probably in the Discord answering questions right now. Hopefully it's not at a time where I'm in the middle of the night or anything like that. It's great to see you all. Thank you so much for coming to my session. If you want to catch up with me, then feel free to ping me. I'm more than happy to have a chat, particularly about anything to do with prompt engineering. I think it's a really great area, really interesting area to work in. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of the other sessions in this conference, and also seeing what you guys are doing out there in the world, and hopefully you can share that with me. So thank you very much, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.